Listen, a sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell on the path, and the birds came and ate them up. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, and they did not have much soil. They sprang up quickly, since they had no depth of soil. When the sun rose, they were scorched. Since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and brought forth grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. Let anyone with ears listen. Boy, those weird old parables. This stole, I'll step out. This stole was made by my friend Lila Ibrahim, a member of the Oakland Unitarian Church, and she patterned it off of the Sower. It's the stained glass. It's a stained glass version of a Millet painting that hangs up above the chancel in that sanctuary. The sower, palm outstretched, seeds casting forth. So many destined for nothing. It's been an important image to me for my whole ministry. My ordination, we sang, it was the central image. We sang a song, "Spread Joy All Over This Land." I think it's an important image, not just for capital M ministry and professional ministry, but that shared ministry, the ministry that all of us participate in, that we were talking about through all of last fall. It's an important image because it's not the sower's work, whatever seeds you sow, to make sure the seeds fall on good soil. The sower isn't concerned where the seeds fall because her work is in the sowing. She's aware of all she cannot do, of all the dangers that the seeds cast will face, of all the challenges there are to growth. And yet she keeps doing what she can, casting the seeds she has to offer. And somehow, the parable tells us, somehow it's enough. Somehow, even though so many seeds fall on the path or the rocky ground or amongst the thorns, it's worth doing because some do fall on good soil. You're going to be totally sick of this parable in about 5 or 6 weeks after I really beat it to death. But the question for me today is what is it that makes good soil? What makes holy ground? How does a place become a holy place? That meditation comes from the philosopher David Abram, who in his book, The Spell of the Sensuous, is attempting to unearth the forgotten consciousness of pre-literate peopleness. His theory is that the alphabetic language, the language that we use that strips all reference in our language to the natural world, the language that becomes self-referential only within the world of humankind, has alienated us from our home, from something deeper and truer that we knew before we made this alphabetized alienation. And one of the noticings he makes, and he draws from phenomenologists like Heidegger and Merleau-Ponty, he's in this big intellectual tradition of trying to understand how does consciousness work, and he draws the conclusion that our whole separation of time and space, the idea of abstracting time and space and then making them their own unique concepts, that none of that has a reality in our embodied lived experience. That's an abstraction that's only possible because of this language alienation. And so he wants to know, if that's true, where do we experience time? What's our physical, embodied knowing of these ideas of past and future? And so he goes down Heidegger's path and talks about these modes of absence, which, by their very way of being absent, he says, makes them felt within the sensuous presence of the open landscape. By their way of being absent makes them present, felt to be present within the sensuous landscape. The horizon becomes this experience of that you feel that there's something beyond the horizon when you are experiencing it bodily. I thought about a sermon where we'd all sit and just look out the window together, but I know some people are a little too light sensitive for that. But if you could turn and look, even if you're over there, and just experience that feeling of their knowing that the world keeps going out beyond that horizon, your bodily experience of knowing it, which by its absence, you feel its presence. And so David Abram thinks, okay, well, if that horizon, we can feel it there, and you know that if you kept going, the horizon would give way to something that you would experience in reality. And if you'd see a new horizon beyond it, and so on. We've all had this experience. And so the horizon is that experience, that felt feeling of the future. But where is the experience of the past? It can't just be that you turn around and the next horizon, because whatever horizon is the future. And so he's looking for that feeling of an absence which makes itself felt by its way of being absent, and comes to the conclusion that the past is the ground beneath us. The past, which we can feel ourselves literally standing upon, which is constructed of layers and layers of all that has come before. The past that literally archaeologists go and dig to find, is this ground beneath us. Remember, one of the moments where I viscerally felt that sense of standing on the good soil of the past was in that church in Oakland with the Millet painting above us. We had just undergone the completion of a 12-year-long, multi-million-dollar renovation and retrofitting project to maintain that 120-year-old Oakland landmark. And to celebrate, we had a rededication ceremony in the newly earthquake-safe sanctuary. And so late on a Sunday afternoon in January, people began to pour into the building, active members, new friends, and old, a great flock of ministers. That's the official term for a group of ministers. City officials all packed into the sanctuary, the point where seating had to be added out in the narthex and the foyer behind, and still some were left standing. The church had been my home for 20 years, and I'd never seen it more full. And as people stood against the walls, crowded the often empty balcony, as the Oakland Interfaith Gospel Choir, which had its start in the building due to our faith's commitment to welcoming people of all sexual orientations, as they sang the soul of the place, as former ministers of the church traveled thousands of miles to let their voices be heard, not just in the walls, but in person. As we rose together to speak words of commitment, I felt history holding us up. It became clear to me that this present moment, it contained so many other moments, seeds which had been planted decades or a century or more before, flowers and fruit and new seeds that would emerge in generations to come, present in that moment. I had a glimpse, it felt like, of that moment in 1891 when 1,700 people gathered in that same sanctuary, spilling out into the streets and the adjoining hall to dedicate the building for the first time. Or the 1904 moment with the first meeting of what would become Star King School for the Ministry, our UU seminary here in the Bay Area, forming there. I saw the building in 1945 being used to host the organizing meetings of the United Nations. The great history of luminaries passing through those hallowed halls of the transcendentalist Ralph Waldo Emerson, the novelist Jack London, Swami Vivekananda preaching Hinduism in the United States, the U.S. President William Taft, the abolitionist Julia Ward Howe, Isadora Duncan performing her debut dance, her first public dance in that sanctuary. I saw visions of my own children growing up surrounded by a community like the one that I grew up in. Saw a vision of that church in 120 more years, celebrating another milestone and looking back with gratitude at those who kept the walls from crumbling. In the retrofitting process, they found a brick deep in the building that had carved into it the signatures of the original masons in the 1880s who had built that building. They took that brick out, and the workers who had now put their sweat into the building this time around carved their own signatures into it, or placed it innocuously back into the wall. And here too, I imagine those families who first trekked up this hill, the Robinsons and the Wrights and so many others who could see on this oak-dappled hilltop a holy place. And while we can speak of some momentous occasions that have happened here, like offering Angela Davis a platform to speak from where no one else in the county would, I can't, of course, for a building built in 1960s, offer big names and events from the 19th and early 20th century, but I know that the history of that place is the history of this place too, the history that formed me, that brought this seed to your good soil. And I also know that to have a storied history with names like those to rattle off, well, just give it 100 years more or so. This capital campaign, I think, is about a pride that has bloomed from seeds within you. Not the kind of pride that's a self-identity to protect from the shame that we can feel. That kind of pride all of us learn to adapt to, but a pride that is about knowing who you are and about knowing that what you do here matters. it has been spectacular to watch the leadership organize around this campaign to commit not only time and care, but a tremendous amount of money. To have raised more than half already of a very ambitious $2.5 million goal. This is hard work. It's hard work to decide to give a lot of money. It's hard work to talk about money at all. I worked with an interim minister once who said, Unitarian Universalists, and probably this is true for most people, would rather talk about their sex lives or their bowel movements than about money. It's hard. It gets at some really thorny stuff in our culture. I think some of us want to treat money like, let's just make it invisible. Let's not talk about the differences that we have around money, because it's too uncomfortable to name and talk about those differences. But I think, like Audre Lorde calls us to, it is not the differences that divide us. It's our inability to accept, celebrate, and appreciate those differences. I just mangled her quote, but you know what I mean. To celebrate those differences, to see them and say, we actually need all kinds. You'll see those gift charts when stewards visit with you. They're going to have this chart of all the different layers. They're alphabetized. And you can see A through, I don't know, K. and we need gifts at every level to accomplish something good, because good soil needs all kinds. This is my fiance Caitlin's here. You can meet her after the service of you. And I was confirming with her, because she's the gardener. I'm the help in our garden. And in the soil, though, I do understand you need a lot of different kinds of minerals to make good soil. And some of those minerals, you need a lot of them. And some of them, you just need a trace amount. But you need them all to be there. What good soil takes is a wide range of composition. And of course, the organic process that makes good soil, the process of life, of God the Verb moving in the world, of wondrous love, making that good soil, it makes it, if we can just stop putting toxins in it, then the good soil just happens. If we can stop monocropping. And there are folks who have wealth who decide that what they're going to give their wealth to is just a gated garden for those who also have wealth. And it's been on my mind what a blessing it is to be part of a community of people with a wide range of means who decide that it's worth being in community with one another, that this is what it's worth investing in. Not a gated garden for some, but in that good soil that is there for all. And so, if we can stop putting those toxins, those fears and aspersions of one another into that soil, it makes me think of the first element in that process. You might have remember me talking about this, that I learned with David White, his process of conversational leadership. The first thing you need to do is figure out what's the conversation you need to stop having. What do you need to stop putting in the soil? And I think this capital campaign is going to let you stop having some conversations that you're sick of. Those hallways that need widening. Let's stop having that conversation. We've stopped having the conversation about do we stay or do we go. Stop having the conversation about what to do about the flooding that happens every year in the downstairs. There's a lot of conversations that have been sapping the energy of this congregation that stopping having will allow for new and good things to grow. The truth is, all places are holy. Every inch of this earth is sacred ground, but every place is also unique in its holiness. And we make that holiness, we make the specialness of the holiness that happens here through the stories we tell, through the feelings we have here, the way we hold one another, the selves we welcome, the nutrients we amend with, the seeds we plant. One last story. I planted a seed. Santa Claus planted the seed, but it was really me. In my family, by buying a book for Christmas called Baking Bread with Kids. And so we've been baking bread lately. And you put that seed of yeast in, right, and watch it grow and wait. And the instructions, and Henry loves the instructions. He loves following instructions. It's a wonderful quality in a child. As long as you don't take it too far. But the instructions say, wait that last proofing, wait half an hour to an hour. And if an hour goes by and it hasn't risen enough, it hasn't reached the top of the loaf pan, wait even longer. Wait another 15 minutes and another. The organic process of time is one that we can measure, but we cannot control. Sometimes it takes 60 years to be ready for a capital campaign. Sometimes the process of our hearts, and many of you, I'm grieving a dear friend right now. I can feel the organic process of that grief moving, rising, in moments taking over, and in moments setting aside. Like the baking of bread or the growing of seeds, there is a time for every purpose. The time here is right. The soil is good. The past is on our side. The future is depending on us. Let all who have ears to hear listen. Amen. May it be so.